Thank you for attending. It's time to get started. My name is Mark Toback. I'm the superintendent of schools. I've been here in Wayne. This is my 8th year. And so let's acknowledge, first of all, that not all of you are here for the same reasons. Some of you are concerned about curriculum, others are concerned about health and physical education. Others may be here because you're worried about a specific issue or something that happened in your child's class. So others may be here because you're just curious about what's happened. Even though you're not all here for the same reasons, and maybe you have different viewpoints about a variety of other issues that we'll be discussing this evening, you do have some things in common. You care about your children, and you care about the education they'll receive from the school system. We respect that, and we believe that's a great place to start for our discussion. We hope to take advantage of what we have in common and recognize differences of opinion in a positive manner. Arguments and differences of opinion do not always have to be scorched earth experiences where one side overwhelmingly defeats the other. That approach leads to resentment and increased tension. So as a school superintendent here in Wayne, I can certainly attest to the fact that over time, there have been some disputes, there's been some issues that have made their way to the surface in the district. And but sometimes that leads to a positive outcome. So for example, a serious dispute in the community and months of controversy ultimately led to a full-day kindergarten program we're about to start in a few weeks. So maybe it didn't happen on the timeline someone hoped for, but it eventually happened. My point is that disagreements aren't always bad. Productive disagreements can lead to solutions and greater understanding. In the spirit of learning and understanding, we scheduled this event, and we hope that you'll find our time together to be helpful and productive. The Wayne Township Public Schools have traditionally been a source of great pride for the community. Unfortunately, I do believe right now, there is some misinformation that's out there that is being shared that influences some people's perception of the school system, or at very least raises several serious questions. Another goal we have for this evening is to clear up any false information about our school system, because it is overall, it's our school system, all of us. The format for this evening involves 2 sessions. The first part is a presentation. After the presentation, we're going to break up into smaller groups. The small group sessions are the right time for you to ask additional questions, to make statements, and all that will be recorded by the administrators attending each session. Members of the community will also have a period of time where they can submit questions. Once we compile the information at the sessions and from the broader community, we will develop another FAQ so that the entire community has access to this information. We're also going to post the presentation from this evening and the video that should be posted tomorrow. This is a big topic. We recognize it will take time to digest some of this information. Our presentation tonight was designed for a very broad audience. Some of you are seeking a general understanding of the issues, and the presentation, as you see it tonight, will do a good job of that. For those of you looking for a deeper understanding, you will find many links included throughout this presentation. The links will take you to source documents, so you'll be able to take the direct link to the legislative actions that have generated some of the concerns you have. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce our administrators in attendance. Now Reichman, our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, will be co-presenting with me, and she'll be discussing a number of important issues this evening. Maggie Lindowski is our Director of Nursing. Matt Mignonelli is our Director of Secondary Education. Dana Sir is our Director of Student Support Services. Scott Burkholder is our Assistant Director of Student Support Services. Joe Bouchard is our Director of Technology. Roger Roglin is the principal of Packanack Elementary School. Jack Leonard is the principal of George Washington Middle School. Ethan Mahan is the principal of Fallon Elementary. Ken Pawzewski is the principal of Wayne Valley High School. And Mike Gruick is the principal of Wayne Hills. A special thanks to all of our administrators for volunteering to attend this event. Also in attendance, we have some of our Board of Education members. We have Board President Kathy Kazan. We have Michael Bubba, Eileen Albanese, and Don Kumal. So let's get started with the presentation. So one of the things that I always found helpful, whether I was a teacher or whether I have to explain something to my own kids, is a timeline. So I think it's very helpful for everybody to see a timeline and to understand when you have a complicated issue, there's a lot of moving parts. And a timeline is a way of taking a lot of moving parts and simplifying it, right? It also helps with seeing connections from one issue to the other. So this timeline was developed with you in mind, right? Basically, what we did is we put together some general information about the legislative actions. So you can see on the top left corner, there's 18A statutes that require the teaching of contributions of disabled and LGBT persons to be included in middle and high school curriculum. See the date the law was signed, when it was signed into law. You also see information next to it about A4454, which is the diversity, inclusion, health, and PE curriculum, and the timeline for when that was signed. That was just March of this year. Then as you go down, you'll see basically activity in the district. Now, this is not exact science. This is not a perfect representation of timelines or anything like that, but it's a general idea of basically what's been occurring in the district. So you can see about where books were added to our libraries and classrooms representing a more diversified group of authors. So that's been an ongoing process that's been going on for a few years. And then you can also see in the very bottom, Board of Ed activity, okay? So the Board of Activity includes our first diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. Then you can see the report about that goal took place on the 10th of June. So Tamika Reese, who you may have read about, or you may have seen her presentation, presented her findings and the committee's findings about the diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. Then you can see on the 24th of June, the board included year 2 of the diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. Okay? So I'm hoping that all of you will understand that, so we have a goal that's approved, and you will be able to hear a little bit more about this tonight in more detail about this goal. But the idea is the goal will inform some other things that are required activities for the school district, including making changes to our health and physical education standards, and other changes that have to do with the curriculum. Okay? But you also see as we go along through the evening, each school has its own team. And each school will basically explore these issues as a team, and those teams traditionally include parents. So parents will be involved in the process, and we'll go through a process to get to whatever curricular changes that are going to happen. The point of the blue rectangle is to show you we're at a timeline. So for some of you, and some of you have written to me about what's happening next year, what's happening, within when my child comes back to school, what should I expect? There's a timeline here where ultimately nothing formal will happen in terms of changes to the curriculum. Nothing will be happening in terms of what's going on in the district. And then, but by the spring of 2022, that's the timeline for when activities would start to happen. And quite honestly, we also have another very important issue, which is the opening of schools during a pandemic, which is obviously a challenge. And I know it's all challenging for you. It's certainly a challenge for everybody. It's a very difficult thing. And I know that it's a tough time for everyone. That's a general, I guess, a general timeline about what's been happening in the district and the reasons why, right? There's reasons why all this has happened. So you can see all that. Like I said, this will be available for all of you to look at as soon as we post the presentation. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I shared at the last board meeting that as parents and community members were asking questions, we were gathering the questions, and that was used as a basis for constructing the presentation tonight. One of the questions that came up repeatedly was for us to distinguish between equity and equality and what that means in the Wayne schools. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. Equity is a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity in education. In the Wayne Township Public Schools, we meet each student where they are at in terms of their learning and development to maximize individual student outcomes and optimize the overall educational experience. The Wayne Schools offers a variety of programs to meet the individual needs of our students. These include our general education classes with supplementary support aids, reading instruction, basic skills instruction, special education programming, related services, English as a second language, and home instruction. Equality is the state of being equal. Equality of opportunity means regardless of your racial background, gender, socioeconomic, there's an ideal of everyone being truly equal. And the American Disabilities Act says we do things and make accommodations to help people who are disadvantaged to ensure that everyone has access to the same opportunities. I know there were a lot of questions, and Dr. Toback alluded to some of this when he was sharing the timeline. What is the plan for the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion goal? Many of the questions that surfaced at the meetings were related to the presentation that was made at the end of the school year. Those were recommendations. We're now entering our second phase of the goal. And as Dr. Toback shared, the priority right now is on the safe reopening of schools. It is of utmost importance that we have our kids back in school all day, every day. We're going to continue to work with our staff, students, and the Wayne Schools community. So we thank you all for coming to address any misinformation that's out there. For the 2021-22 school year, we're going to continue to teach the K-12 New Jersey Student Learning Standards. We'll provide professional development to our instructional staff about the implementation of these standards and the use of supplemental resources. I know that there have been concerns and questions that were asked about the consultant. All of our professional development that is planned right now will be delivered by us for our staff. We are anticipating that the New Jersey Department of Education will be providing guidance, resources, and sample lessons. They are also anticipating that an FAQ will be put out this fall. We're going to continue to incorporate age-appropriate, diverse books in our resource banks to teach empathy and acceptance. And our curriculum documents are linked in the presentation, which takes you to the Wayne Schools curriculum page. This presentation will be online tomorrow. It was intended to be interactive. You see there's a website right there. That takes you to all of our curriculum documents. You're able to, by age, by content area, view everything that has been board approved and that is used as a guide for instruction for our students. To further elaborate on the district goal for the 2021-22 school year, we're going to be creating diversity, equity, and inclusion teams at each school. I know our board president, Ms. Kazan, talked about following the chain of command. I know that there are many questions, there are concerns, and it's important that all of these are answered and addressed. We are asking that if you have a concern about a specific grade level lesson, if there is something that a teacher shares in class, you bring that to your building principal. They will then work with their building level team to assess what the concern is. It will then be brought to our district advisory team. We will be meeting monthly. There was also a question about parent involvement. We will have a few parents in each building who will be invited to be part of the team. It will then come to the district advisory team, which will be comprised of school level representatives. And we will use this information to just better inform us about professional development and any concerns that we have to address related to supplemental resources that may be used in class.
Can I just talk about this?
Yep.
Just go back. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about, from an administrator's perspective, why this goal is important. Bottom line is the district can pursue any goal that it would like to pursue. There's a lot of different things that are out there. A4454, as you saw, is so A4454 is a required activity. It's something the board has to carry out, and we'll show you the exact law in a little bit. But there is some leeway within the law. And so the fact is the district is a big district. One of the issues that exists in a large district like this is internal consistency, right? So in other words, the idea that every school is doing pretty close to the same thing. The other issue is communication, right? If every school is a silo, then we don't learn from each other. So the idea is that each of the schools will basically be able to share information through a district committee and talk about issues that are important to you right? Different issues that may come along as curriculum is developed or as options are considered. These are all things that are shared across the district, so it's something that's very important. So it really has to do with implementation, along with other unfinished business and different things. We had a series of recommendations from a consultant, and those recommendations would be considered. So in other words, the district has not acted on any of those recommendations. They are simply recommendations. What happens with those recommendations is another story and to be determined. Okay. So, so the question that we've seen from a number of people that wrote and they've asked, is critical race theory being taught in the Wayne Township Public Schools? So the answer is no. It's a controversial topic. It's something that that many people are very concerned about. Okay? The fact is, it's not part of our curriculum. Do we understand and are we aware of everything that goes on in every classroom? Do teachers have a bias? Is there maybe perhaps a political bias or other type of bias that a teacher might have? And can things tilt one way in a maybe a presentation by a teacher or a lesson? The answer is yes. So we don't claim to have knowledge of every single situation. What we do know is that some parents have provided us with examples. So we do have a handful of examples from parents where hopefully they've taken issue with perhaps the way a teacher presents the topic, or they've taken issue with a resource that's used. So those things are all, there's policies for them. So the district does have policies. And so the idea is that if there is a situation where you are not sure, or you're not happy, or you think there's a resource that's being used that you don't agree with, they said the district and the Board of Ed has a policy for anyone to deal with that. And we'll talk about that a little more in detail as we go through this evening.
I know that there have been a lot of questions about A4454. In my role as the assistant superintendent, I provide oversight to instruction and curriculum. I work with the education committee, and it's really important for everyone to know when there is a law that's in place, we are required to evidence through our curriculum and document through our instruction that we are meeting all of the mandates of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. This slide details a lot, and I think the most important thing to know that it was passed on March 21st, and the requirement, and I think that the area of concern was beginning in the 2021-22 school year, that's next year, each school district shall incorporate instruction on diversity and inclusion in an appropriate place in the curriculum of students in grades kindergarten through 12 as part of the district's implementation of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. The instruction shall highlight and promote diversity, including economic diversity, equity, inclusion, tolerance, and belonging in connection with gender and sexual orientation, race and ethnicity, disabilities, and religious tolerance. The curriculum that we have in place follows the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. We look at our instruction and we identify each appropriate resources and materials. Under the bill, the Commissioner of Education is saying that we will be provided with sample learning activities and resources designed to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have been seeking out from Trenton additional guidance, asking to see these resources. We have elevated these questions to the county office. They have been elevated to Trenton. And I would urge you to seek out, because this is an important part of what we need to do. And it would be nice for us to have guidance from them that we can share with all of you. The persons with disability and LGBTQ legislation is another area where we are offering instruction. This applied to the 2020-21 school year. And it basically says that the Board of Education shall have policies and procedures in place pertaining to the selection of instruction materials to implement the requirements of Section 1 of this Act. When adopting instructional materials for use in schools of the district, a Board of Education shall adopt inclusive instructional materials that portray the cultural and economic diversity of society, including the political, economic, and social contributions of persons with disabilities and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people where appropriate. And again, we look for age-appropriate resources. These are all embedded in the curriculum. You can review and look at our curriculum documents online. If there are questions, you can share them with the building principal. If there are any resources that are used in class that are in question, bring them to your building principal. They will be reviewed by the district, the building level committee, and brought to the district level committees. And if it's something that we need to report out on district-wide, we will do that. If you have an objection to content that's being delivered in the class, again, follow the chain of command. But I think it's really important that parents become familiar with our policy. They're linked in 2530 and policy 3310. 2530 is the policy for resource materials, and I want to bring your attention to some of the language. Wherever possible, materials will provide major opposing views on controversial issues so that the pupils may develop under guidance the practical and critical reading and thinking. Wherever possible, materials will represent the many religious, ethnic, and cultural groups and their contribution to American heritage. So this is part of our policy. I know there have been concerns about certain lessons, and it is really important that you represent both sides of you, both sides of both perspectives. And again, if you feel like something was not represented fairly and according to our policy, share that with your building principal, and we can review the lesson and the materials that are used. 3310 is the policy for academic freedom. And again, this policy recognizes that some deviation from the course guide is sometimes necessary for free exchange of ideas within the classroom. Many of the questions that came our way were related to the health and PE curriculum. This is a link to this curriculum document. At the breakout session following our presentation, we do have copies of the K through 12, the elementary, the K through 6 curricular lessons related to this where questions surface, and they will be responded to in a draft. Some of you have shared concerns about the content in the health and PE curriculum. I think it's really important to look at the standards. One thing that you should know is that there was a lot of misinformation out there. I think that the information that was shared, this information that was shared on social media was not accurate. If there are things that are shared and those are things that spark concern, you should definitely make us aware. I think spreading misinformation was something that really heightened the concern in the community over this curriculum. We have not implemented any changes to the curriculum. Anything that is controversial can be embedded by us in a unit where parents will have an opportunity to opt out. I know that the grade levels that were specified, grade 2 was one that comes to mind where I know there were very deep concerns. The information that was shared was inaccurate. Those are things that are embedded in the curriculum in grade 8. After this session, if you're attending the breakout session, you will have an opportunity to look at the curriculum and see exactly where it's there. Once we have resources in place and sample lessons, they'll all be updated and included in our curriculum documents for parents to view. I think that this really just elaborates and expands what I was sharing. It's important to know that we're required to teach anything that is part of the New Jersey student learning standards. There are places and units where parents do have rights to opt out. We have sought out additional guidance on that, but right now we're taking your concerns, and all of this is being considered. None of the curriculum work has been done. Curriculum work is being planned for the spring of 2022. Any updates to the curriculum would be board approved next summer, a year from now, and then be implemented a year from September. Again, in the spirit of making this an interactive presentation and recognizing that you may have questions after the presentation, that you may not be present in all the breakout sessions, or you may be someone in the community who was unable to attend tonight, I thought this was very helpful. This is what I was referencing. It's the document for the curriculum that tells you by the end of grade 2, end of grade 5, end of grade 8, and end of grade 12, what we're required to teach. In the blue, or the heading, you can actually click there, and it will take you right to the pages. And this addresses the concerns that were shared at the previous board meeting, and we did receive emails. Wrap it up? Yep.
So before we break into our other groups, I just want to say something very quickly about the school district. It is a wonderful school district, and most of you have very strong connections with your children's teachers. Okay? My advice to you, one of the reasons why we went to great length to put this document together, is to empower you so that if you hear something that's just totally out of line, seems a little crazy, makes no sense, does not seem like something that would happen in the school district, this is something that can definitely help. So if there's something like that happens, then certainly this document is a great reference. It's intended for the whole community to be able to check and make sure of the school system, because we want you to be confident in the school system. Like I said, we think we have a great school system, fantastic school system. And we want to keep that great pride in our school district going. So we want to make sure that you have answers to questions that you have. I'm sure you have more questions. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break into, or we're going to take a little break, and we'll go into our breakout rooms.
We do have some helpers, so if you're unsure of how to get to your location, our high school group is going to stay here. Our elementary language arts and social studies curricular concern group is going to go right across the hall. And middle school will meet in room 118. We will have someone there to help you. And high school, I said, is going to stay here. Oh, elementary health is going to the cafeteria.